Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matthew Noriega, and I'm just going to be talking with you about framing debate in your college application. So, first, just a little bit about me. I am currently a student at the Wharton School of the University of Pennsylvania. Just finished up my freshman year there. I also work for the admissions office, so I know a little bit more about the admissions process at Penn and its peer institutions than someone else might who is a student there. I'm also still involved with debate in college, so I'm on the varsity parliamentary debate team, Penn Debate Society. So if you have any questions about college debate, we'd love to talk about that with you as well. Secondly, I'm similar to a lot of you. I did Congress in high school. I was a semifinalist at Nats and TOC. I guess the biggest quote unquote claim to fame is that in my senior year, I had the second most TFA state points as anyone else, or rather in the state. Kind of an empire of dirt because it just meant that I went to a lot of locals and did well. But I think it shows that I had a lot of commitment and passion for the activity. Oh, and then thirdly, so maybe possibly similar to a lot of you, possibly not, but I was very, very neurotic about college apps when I was in high school. Uh, to a pretty obsessive degree, read like lots of books about it, articles, forums, et cetera, et cetera. So I can totally relate to all the anxiety that some of you may be having about applying to college or not. And I can definitely speak to, how that process was navigated for sure. And then obviously it worked out well for me. That's why I'm talking about it right now. Lastly, I'm from Houston, Texas, so I'm big into Houston sports. I like indie rock music a lot, like The Strokes, Interpol, stuff like that. Film criticism, weightlifting, my dog. So if you like any of those things, feel free to talk about that. I would love to talk about that with you. So let's just give a quick overview of what this lesson is going to look like. First, just kind of gonna ask the question, how useful even is debate for college apps in the first place? Then how we can frame it as well as we possibly can in our application. And then lastly, just some final words of advice that I have for you. And then some Q&A. So the first thing is that, in all honesty, debate kind of sucks for college apps, unfortunately. This is a really famous graph that I initially saw from Sungju Yoon, who's a three-time National Congress finalist that's now a student at Harvard University. But it explains a pretty simple concept of diminishing marginal returns, specifically in debate, which is that whenever you first start out in debate, you just join the team, you can see some pretty linear progress in terms of how your experience in debate helps out both you on your resume, on your college application, and just your personal fulfillment from seeing progress in the activity. Maybe you make the officers team, maybe you become the captain of your team, right? These are all linear steps. But then whenever you start going to state tournaments and placing at these tournaments or, going to winning local tournaments and things like that, I think that you get to a point where you start to plateau, at least in terms of, value, because 90% of these things start to blend together, Oh, I won this local tournament, or oh, I got eighth place at the Wyoming state tournament, right? I mean, that's amazing, right? But, just think about the fact that, Congress is just one event, right? So there's 12 different events that the NSTA offers, right? So 8 times 12, 96, if I'm not mistaken. Well, then there's also 50 states, right? So 96 times 50, that's like 4,800 students, right? So now we have like thousands of people that have the same accolades as you or better on the state level. So it's just hard for an admissions officer to delineate your application from someone else's solely based off of state accomplishments, right? So then, okay, maybe you move on to the national circuit, right? You start getting some TUC bids, you start placing at TUC bid tournaments. That's also really amazing, and that definitely does set you apart quite a bit. But you do also get to the point where it starts to blend together. Why is like MLK a better tournament than Blue Key? Or, why is having XYZ bids so important in the first place, Then, of course, pretty obvious awards that anyone can see and understand. You finaled at Nats, you ranked at Nats, you finaled at Harvard, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe you won one of these tournaments. Maybe you made Team USA. Um, and I think that for what it's worth, I show you this to say that if you're doing debate solely to get into college, it's not a very good value proposition because the time it takes to get to the point where it even helps your application by a wide margin is so monumental. It takes so much time that you might be better served doing something else, right? But okay, let's say you actually do reach the pinnacle. Let's say you actually do reach the top of the debate world. I think that even insofar as this is true, you still lose time for course rigor. You still lose time to ace all your classes, take a bunch of APs, take the SAT and do well in it, have other activities that are impactful, write good essays, et cetera, right? And these are all prerequisites just for getting your application past the first screen when you're applying. So that's why every single year, time and time again, even people that champ major tournaments will still get rejected from top colleges across the board. And it's a shame. And so you might be thinking, like, this sounds really doom and gloom, right? So basically, Matthew, you're saying that debate's not going to help me unless I do XYZ thing. But even if I do, it's not going to help me. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that you shouldn't be worried about all this in the first place. In fact, I think this should be really liberating for the simple reason that once you separate your passion from debate from the utility that you think it has for your college app, I think you're going to have a much more meaningful experience. Hence, this concept I have of applying sideways, which was first originated in an MIT admissions blog in 2010. It's a really simple concept, right? The concept is this. Basically, if you find something that you're passionate about, find activities that you love, and then you really commit yourself to them because of that passion that you have for it, you fully immerse yourself and you just let yourself, your passion roam free, then you'll naturally start to begin achieving amazing things in that activity as a result, as a byproduct of that passion that you have. And then this same holds true for classes, right? You should be taking challenging classes because you're an intellectually curious person and because you want to learn about the world. You should be being a great member of your community because it's a rewarding and fulfilling process that, gives you lots of meaningful lessons and relationships. And so the idea here is that if you do all of the things that I just said, not only are you going to be putting yourself in an amazing position to get into an elite university, but even if you don't, you won't have any regrets because all the things that you did were things that were meaningful to you. Hence, you should do debate because you love doing debate, not because of college applications. But with that out of the way, how can I use debate on my college application, right? Okay, three things here. First, write meaningful essays about it. Secondly, leverage it properly on your resume, on your honors and activities list. And then thirdly, use it as a through line on your application, not as a silver bullet. Let's start with the first thing, which is essays, right? So the biggest concept that you have to understand whenever you're writing essays for a scholarship or college application is that your essays should be telling a story, using a narrative, right? So you should be showing, not telling, not I am a leader or I am a good speaker, giving them an actual narrative that shows that you have, fulfilled those qualities. So some quick do's and don'ts, right? Don't just answer the prompt. If they say, why do you want to go to XYZ school? No, don't just be like, because the school is good. Tell them a story about, what something you've done and how that connects with the university's values. Don't just regurgitate your accomplishments. That's what the resume is for. And then I think the biggest pitfall you might fall into is giving a response that only matters in the context of succeeding in debate, right? Let's say you won a really challenging tournament to win, right? That's amazing. But like, what does that really do for the world? What does that do for your community? What does that do for you as a person, right? So I think like this common narrative of like, oh, I was bad at debate, and then I practiced a lot, and then I got really good at debate, and now I'm really amazing and awesome. Like, this isn't really a story about debate, right? This is a story about anything that you practice at and get better at. And this is a story about anything that you win a major selective award for, right? It's not specific. So I think that what you should be doing is providing an engaging narrative that actually demonstrates why debate is so impactful in the first place. So how did it help you grow as a person? How did it help you grow as a leader? How did it empower you to make an impact in your community? I think these are the questions that actually do make debate interesting in the first place, in terms of the value that you're getting from the activity. And these are the things that set you apart from the dozens of students every year that are applying to college with all of these activities on the resume in debate that show that they've won top tournaments, right? So let's look through an example real quick. So this is just to give you a brief caveat, I'm going to be using my essay here because I wrote about debate on my application. I don't have any false conceptions of myself being like really amazing at writing or my essay being perfect. It's definitely not perfect, but this is the best essay that I could find, like that I have access to that actually explains all the principles I'm talking about. It's something that I know well, something that actually relates to debate. But yeah, so this is the common application. Prompt 2. The lessons we take from obstacles we encounter can be fundamental to later success. Talk about a time you failed or had an obstacle, what you learned from it, right? And don't worry, I'm not going to read the entire essay in front of you. There's actually a link to the essay in the Google Classroom if you care to read the whole thing. I'm just going to give you like a brief like synopsis and kind of explain the principles that I'm trying to, amplify with this essay. So the first thing is like, have a gripping intro, right? Opening sentence, stand alone. The setting is like basically this, right? I'm at a funeral for a family member, and the speaker or the priest is saying for people to come up and speak, and then no one's doing so. So sad. Their legacy isn't being honored, right? And so then I got up on the stage and gave the speech, right? And then like this is kind of an example of an actual narrative that like has to do with like advocating for somebody else when no one else will. The importance of public speaking, the importance of being an advocate in speech and debate. And then I kind of link that into speech and debate itself. Like, okay, yeah, debate was something that like I learned about my passion for through this experience. Then I joined into debate. And then here's the obstacle that I encountered, right? Like, oh, I wanted to do well at TFA State or the Texas State Championship, and then I didn't break. Wow, so sad, right? Um, but if you'll notice, I don't spend a lot of time doting on the fact that I didn't do well. I also don't spend a lot of time doting on the fact that my family member passed away, because the whole point about your essay and your application is that one, it should be about you, and two, it should be forward looking, right? So I explained like, oh, I cared a lot and it didn't work out, but then the rest of the essay is focused on reflection and growth, right? So, okay, this experience made me reflect about the connection between like the obstacles I've had in my life with family stuff and debate itself, how those things are inextricably interlinked, how they made me into a stronger person, how they made me into a better leader. And then I conclude the essay with just some reflection on what all these experiences mean for me, how they all tie together. And then I have an outro that ties back into the introduction, which ideally your Congress speeches should be having as well, your AGD and your outro tying together. And by all means, this is not like a perfect template that you can use. You also have supplemental essays where you'll be writing about debate. I can totally answer any questions about that if you have any. And of course, your personal statement will be personalized to you. But I just show you this to say that like whenever you're creating your essays, you should be telling a story, you should be having reflection, you should be imbuing it with more meaning than just I did well at a debate tournament, right? Because that's not really a special story to tell. So if you are trying to tell that story, it's not doing it in the essays, right? You're doing it in the activities list, right? You did really well in debate, right? Same principles apply. You, of course, should be highlighting your competitive victories here. That's what the resume is for. But I think that you should try to frame them in a way that shows like the deeper values that they're, being emblematic of, impact, leadership, right? So whenever you're writing your activity description, how did your success as a captain improve the team? Did you mentor other people? Did you lead them? Did you raise money for your team? Did you expand tournament access? All these things, right? Did you use your debate skills in other activities, right? Let's say you were student body president. Let's say you did community service work, right? These are examples of how your debate skills actually helped, your community around you. And then I think like if you want to get like a free award, the Speech and Service Award with NSDA, this is a great avenue to just do this, right? If you do a bunch of debate community service, you can get this award as well. That can kind of demonstrate how you made an impact with your debate experience. So when we're talking about actually competitive and quantitative success, though, the biggest thing here is you should be quantifying your accomplishments as much as humanly possible. So we're going to do actually an activity real quick, which is looking at a bad award in terms of like how it's framed and saying like why it's bad. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand using the raise hand feature on Zoom and just tell me why this award is bad. And I'm not going to continue until someone does this. Why would like quote unquote Congress 2C qualifier be like not a good description? Okay, Jaden, go ahead.
Because you're not being specific about what you accomplish and like what impact it has.
Sure. Great response. Angela?
You don't say how many bids you've won, and you can also say something about like how many people you're competing against, like how many people are like part of the community and how exclusive qualifying
Yeah,
is.
perfect. Great answer. And then lastly, I'll take one from Rohan. Jane.
It doesn't really exemplify at face value, it doesn't really mean anything to college admissions. You need to prove to him that like you're in like the top 5% or top 1% or whatever. How many people basically there were and how many people did you beat?
Yeah, exactly. That's spot on. So exactly, right? What is the context for this? This doesn't mean anything. How hard is it to achieve? What is the story of this award? And then also like a niche thing that like you might not know, but Common App actually gives you 100 characters to write your awards, right? This only uses 20 characters. So you're incurring an opportunity cost of 80 spots when you don't have to do that, and you shouldn't. So here's a better version of the exact same thing. That's I guess specific to me. So Tournament of Champions qualifier in congressional debate, approximately 200 out of 15,000, first in school's 15-year program history, et cetera, right? So you might be wondering, Matthew, where did you get those numbers from, right? Well, there's actually public data that you can look on Tabroom's website, the TUC bid scorecard, the NSDA membership database, and then let's say you won a tournament, you can look at the entry list on Tabroom to actually quantify your accomplishment. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in the next slide. But further, I think that it also shows the meaning and context, right? So like, I'm sure a lot of you go to schools where lots of people qualify for TUC, but even then, I'm sure there's some context that you can provide to make it more interesting. You know, Angela had the idea of including how many bids you got, for example, I believe. If it wasn't you, Angela, I'm sorry. So anything to make the award like more interesting or flesh it out more is going to be beneficial to you. And then lastly, of course, it uses all the characters. There's no opportunity cost being incurred. So whenever I'm talking about, you know, framing, you know, quantifying your activities, here's some actually ways that you can literally do that, right? Yeah, the NSDA membership database will allow you to look at how many people are in the NSDA, how many people do each event. At the very, very bottom here, there's a spreadsheet that will actually show you, you know, how many people do all the different events, how many people do the event in your state, for example, or how many people are in your state. And you can use that to quantify the different parts of your application. I'll take a question from Angela if you're still wanting to ask, or you can lower your hand.
No, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Yeah, no worries at all, no worries at all. And so then we have the TUC bid scorecard. This one is like a little bit tedious, right? But you literally just go on results, you go to TUC bid, and then you just count up the numbers for your event. Hasn't started yet, so you can go to 2023. Like this is pretty tedious, right? But I mean, if you really care a lot about, you know, making everything framed like in a way that is you know, properly framed, then you can go ahead and do that if you wish. Carl, was there a question from you?
Oh, yeah. Just a question for like trying to find speaking points for certain events. Is that only if you compete for in places that like use NSDA, or can that be found through any tournament?
How do you mean speaking points? You mean like in LD and PF, those events?
Oh no, like when you're earning points in each event, the slide that you're on.
Oh, yeah. So we earning points in this event. This isn't like I think this is specifically like NSDA points, right? And you can check your NSDA points on your NSDA account. But basically, like this is just a list of people that earned at least 1 point in Congress one time. So people that did Congress at any point during that year. Hence where the 15,000 number is from, right? Like ostensibly, everyone that does Congress wants to be a champion. They want to be a TOC qualifier. So only 2% of the Congress community actually gets to accomplish that. I'll take two quick questions from Grace and Jaden. So go
Hi,
ahead,
so
Grace.
I'm filling out the common application right now. How would you determine like what awards to list? Because I do compete a lot and there's only like 5 awards categories, but then I also have other awards. And under the activity section, I have debate listed as an activity, but there's only 150 characters and I'm also like a captain and I do service work. So how would you like
Great,
pick what
great
to list?
question. I'll actually answer that exact question on the next slide in detail. And then Jaden, real quick.
When you're counting up the TOC base, is it better to round it up, or should you give the exact number?
Um, I I think you should just like save space and be honest. Like in this case, like well, I don't think you can round up like integer numbers like TUC bids, right? You can only get X number of bids, right? But I mean, like if you're talking about how many qualifiers there were and like how many competitors there were, I just put 15,000. I thought that was a reasonable rounding number, and then approximately 200. I don't know. I didn't feel like counting it. I think it's similar to that. But like. Yeah, I mean, I just always did like 200 plus or around 200 or like whatever like rounding I could possibly do to make it look like fancy. And then lastly, of course, you have NSDA rankings as an option for, you know, how to set yourself apart. But all these things hold true in the state level too, right? You can look at the database for your state on NSDA's like database, and then you can use that to frame your application too. So like, let's actually look at some examples, right? Just to answer Grace's question. So the first thing is, well, I'll actually answer that a little bit more in a moment, but first just look at a few examples, right? We have like, okay, oh, I won Academic All-American, cool, amazing, top 2%, third in 14-year history, right? You have context, you have quantification. And then actually for the debate description over here, you have if you'll notice, I actually put TFA in the title of the activity so that I could use that acronym in the description to save space. So then like, oh, when I was applying, I hadn't qualified for TOC, I hadn't competed at TOC. So like I didn't have much for my debate when I was applying to college. All my stuff was in my senior year. But still, like I made semis at TFA State, right? So I just counted up how many semifinalists are there in all the events, how many people are there in Texas, bang, 300 out of 20K. And then just quantifying everything else, talking how I captain novices to qualify for regionals, blah, 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 right? But also, I think a lot of these principles hold true for all the activities that I'm showing you here, right? Like down on the left, we have national merit. I mean, for what it's worth, I don't think you should include national merit on your application if you don't have to, because it doesn't really show anything about you. But in my case, I didn't have a lot of awards when I was applying to college. So I just put like, I just made national merit into the best that it could possibly be. So like I quantified it. I said how good I did in the PSAT with the selection index there. And then I said, not a lot of people in my high school got this. Even though it's top 1% in the nation, it's only the top 0.3% of my school. So like context, good, good. And then of course you can see on the left, you have quantification for, or on the right rather, all quantification for all those things as well. So then just some quick things, right? You utilize all the available characters, you employ active verbs, you quantify everything where you can. And then let's start answering Grace's question, right? I have so many activities and so many words and so many accomplishments. How do I fit it all in, right? So given that you have such little space, I think you should be using acronyms. Like for example, for me, I put TFA in the title of my thing so I could use that as an acronym on my description. I use like, abbreviations. Like instead of year, I put YR. Instead of like writing out 2000, I put 2K. Like instead of putting width, I put W slash. Like you should be trying to fit as much stuff into this small space as you possibly can. And then another thing you can do is you can group activities or awards together. So like you could literally put just debate awards, Harvard champion, Yale runner-up, whatever, who cares, right? Academic All-American, and then bang, you can fit more things in small spaces. A good example of this is the community service block I have here, right? I was a volunteer at the Houston Food Bank, but I also started my own like food insecurity club at my school. I just combine these things together and I combine the quantifications together as well. So instead of saying like, oh, I raised 5,000 cans at the food bank and 2,000 cans at my school, I just put how many things I did in total across all of my food insecurity advocacy. So I think this is a way to, save space if you can. Last thing here for your activities and your applications. Oh, actually, before we move on, does that answer your question, Grace? Just give me a thumbs up if so. Okay, great. So then the last thing here is that you should be using debate as a through line on your application, not a silver bullet, right? What do I mean by a silver bullet? I mean that like if you're just putting it as another bullet point on your application, alongside all your other activities, I think that like you can't just do so and expect that to like magically mean that you get into all these colleges, right? Like, oh, I went Harvard, so I'm going to get into all the colleges I apply to. That's not really how it works. But then I think there's another extreme of this where maybe some of y'all will recognize this article. I know I read it when I was in high school. It's by Prep Scholar and Alan Chang, who's like a Harvard alum and college advisor. And basically the idea is that like you should, whenever you're applying to college, don't explore, don't be well-rounded. You should do one thing, you should be world-class at that thing, and you should do really, really well at that thing, right? And I think that this idea is pretty like flawed in my like, and here's the thing, right? There are parts of this idea that make sense, Of course, if you are an Olympian, if you are a Regeneron STS like researcher, if you are a top 1% like math person, then yeah, you're gonna get into the, whole range of colleges that you apply to. But like imagine just telling the median, applicant to a school like Harvard, yeah, just be world class at something and you'll automatically get in. That's not very actionable advice, right? So I think like a better solution here and something that allows you to explore and something that allows you to, frame your application in the best light as you can, even if you're not like literally the best debater in America, is using debate as a through line to tie your activities together. And you can use other things as through lines as well. But for me, this is the main focus of my application just because I felt like it was a good unification of all the activities that I did. So this will allow you to actually adopt a theme for your application that will still, make it look cohesive and tell one coherent story for the admissions officer, but you're not putting all your eggs in one basket, spending literally dozens of hours a week training for the math Olympiad, and then you bomb it, and then bang, you can't get into college, right? So here's some activities that I did in high school. I was at the food bank, I started a club, I did Congress, I did Boys State, I did like a NASA thing, I did like research, whatever, right? If you'll see, like a lot of these things are very, very not related to each other, right? And some of them are minorly related, right? Like I guess if I'm an AP stats tutor, that's like kind of the difference. That's kind of a unification of service and math, or like, oh, if I was like a student body president, like that's kind of like public service and like government interest, right? But I think ultimately, these things are very, very not closely related, right? So I had to find a way to frame my application in a way that tied all my activities together, because otherwise, like a lot of my friends would be asking me, why are you doing so many different things? You're going to confuse the admissions officer, that you're going to look like you don't know what you're doing. And once again, I think it's sad that we were not encouraged to explore when we're in high school and see what we like. But I think that you can still do that as long as you can find a meaningful and coherent way to tie them all together. So I'm going to take some questions, or rather some answers in the chat of what do you think that star could be? What are some principles or themes that could tie together all the activities that you're seeing in front of you right now? Okay, I'm going to cold call then. Rohan, what's like an adjective or something that could tie something? Oh yeah, public service. There we go. In chat, curiosity, public service, amazing, commitment. Yeah, and this is all right. Like, what could the star be? It can literally be anything you want. Leadership, teamwork, advocacy, public speaking, impact, problem solving, community. You decide how you want to tie your activities together. In my case, it was like leadership, public speaking, things like that, because it was a way for me to tie all these things together, right? Like whenever I was doing my NASA thing, I had to do a research presentation. I used public speaking for that. Whenever I was at the food bank, I had to guide adults through the warehouse. Public speaking, Congress, self-explanatory, right? So I focused my application around public speaking and leadership because it was a way for me to tie all my activities together in a meaningful way. And then I told them a coherent story that made sense, right? So you saw my personal statement. You saw like that story of like my growth as a public speaker. Then like on the major that I applied for, right? I applied to business school. That requires a lot of presentational skills and like public speaking and leadership and collaboration. And then like when I asked for my career goal on Common App, I put like I want to be a US senator and business person, right? Public speaking. So like I was able to take all these things that I did and still tie them together in a meaningful way without having to have put all my eggs in one basket from when I started high school. Because frankly, that's just not a sustainable model. All right. So that is kind of the actual like hard details and inner workings of how to frame your application for your college app. But here's some final words of advice and actionable, pieces of wisdom that I think you should consider when you do end up applying. First, college admissions are super unpredictable and they're also super, super anti-meritocratic, right? So obviously, inequality in American society, right? Everyone has different obstacles, everyone has different resources. And yes, colleges do have holistic admissions, but I mean, if your school is precluding you from getting a good SAT score or like taking like a certain amount of AP classes or doing a certain amount of activities, then maybe you're just going to get crowded out by people that have more qualifications, even if it's not fair, But also just general like problems with meritocracy in the process, right? Undeserving candidates are admitted all the time. Deserving candidates are rejected all the time, right? Maybe your admissions officer was in a crappy mood that day. Maybe you're on the football team and they were a band kid in high school that hated jocks. Like you don't know what subconscious bias your reader's going to have. So as a result, you don't know what the outcome is going to be. There are spaces taken up by legacies, children of donors, recruited athletes, right? So I think like you might be hearing all of this and be like, okay, yes, it's unpredictable. Why should that matter? Like, why should I care? What does it mean for me? I think the answer to this question is that literally all you can do is try your best and see what happens. Because insofar as the process is not fair and it's not predictable, literally all you can do is do what you love and do it well and hope for the best. And then you have to just chill. And the great thing here is that like if you're an amazing applicant, if you're an amazing person, if you're smart and creative and curious, you're going to be successful literally anywhere you choose to go. Where you go is not who you'll be. And don't just take it from me, right? Take it from the National Bureau of Economic Research, who did a study a few decades ago that has been replicated since then, showing that like the type of student who was capable of getting into an elite university, who had the qualifications or the scores and the activities, but didn't get in or didn't choose to go, had very similar life outcomes as those who did choose to go. Because once again, it's not about the degree that you frame on your wall after you graduate. It's about the person that you actually are. So as such, I think that you're going to go to the college that you're supposed to go to. And if you're a hardworking person, you're going to have a great experience there. And if you really, really don't have a good experience, yes, I'm sure you can transfer out. I don't think you'll have to. I think you're going to have a great experience no matter what, because you're a hardworking and creative and intelligent person. So I think that the conclusion here is like, please do swing for the fences, shoot for the stars, and try to achieve your dreams. But if it doesn't work out, that's totally okay. And a brief caveat here is that I know how easy it is and how easy it seems for me to come off my ivory tower and then tell you the college you go to doesn't matter. That's not what I'm trying to tell you. I'm just trying to tell you not to obsess about it and worry about it when you know that you can still be successful, which of course begs the question, well, then why did you choose to go to one? Well, firstly, when I applied, I actually knew all of these things. I knew that I would have been successful even if I went to like Texas A&M or UT Austin. So I was just making small optimizations with the type of school that I wanted to go to. It wasn't like a death sentence if I didn't go to my top school. And then secondly, as someone that's actually been through this process and seen dozens of people go through it every single year that I personally know, I know just how well who you are can implicate your actual life outcomes and your educational outcomes, your educational attainment, your career trajectory, your financial success, all of these things. So take it from someone who actually understands how this all works that you're going to be fine. It's going to be okay. Please don't stress about it as much as you might be stressing about it. Okay, so then one last note about applying sideways then is that it might not work. You might literally do everything I just told you for the past 30 minutes and still not get in. And maybe you'll find that really disappointing, right? Maybe you'll be upset there it didn't work out. But even if it doesn't work out, like we said, you did what you love to do. You grew as a person, you made amazing memories, you built amazing relationships, and you didn't ever have to face the agony and regret of doing stuff you hated for college and then not getting in, right? Like imagine if I did LD for 4 years in high school, even though I hate spreading, and I became like a mediocre LDer, and then I didn't get into college, right? I'd be really disappointed and regret all the time that I spent because I did Congress, which I loved and succeeded at. I didn't regret any of the time that I spent doing that. And of course it worked out for me, but even if it didn't, I wouldn't have regretted it, you know? So at the end of the day, I think the biggest takeaway is this. If you really love debate, don't do it for college. Just let yourself fall head over heels for it and cherish every moment with it that you have. Because ultimately, it's about so much more, so much more than getting into a college, right? It's about making friends that you'll have for the rest of your life that you can call at 3 a.m. to rant about the presidential debate in your late 20s, early 30s, right? It's about having meaningful experiences that make you a better leader, a better voter, more open-minded person, more intelligent person, a better human being. And I think it's about formative memories and lessons that you'll literally carry with you for the rest of your life that make you into the person that you are today. So my final takeaway then is that Congress doesn't last forever. In the real world, maybe you'll never be a US senator. Maybe you'll never get to pass a policy to fix climate change like the carbon tax. Maybe you'll never get to halt arms sales to Saudi Arabia to quell the genocide in Yemen, right? But for a brief moment in a high school classroom somewhere in America, you get to make that happen, and all the superficiality and disappointment of the real world doesn't matter. So I think that you should enjoy that as much as you possibly can and soak in all that passion and enjoy every moment. And if you do, I really believe that it will love you back just enough that maybe, just maybe, all this college stuff that I've been talking about will fall right into place.